Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari Yashoda Nandana Braja Jana Ranjana Yashoda Nandana Braja Jana Ranjana Yamuna Tira Vanachari Yamuna Tira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Kunja Bihari Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari Yashoda Nandana Braja Jana Ranjana Yashoda Nandana Braja Jana Ranjana Yamuna Tira Vanachari Yamuna Tira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Kunja Bihari Jaya Gauranita Hai Gauranita Hai Gauranita Jaya Gauranita Jaya Jagannatha, Jaya Jagannatha, Jai Baladeva, Jaya Subhadramaya, Jaya Jagannatha, Jagannatha, Baladeva, Jaya Radha, Vallabha Radha, Vallabha Sri Radhe. Jaya Jaya Prabhupada, 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 Jaya Jaya Prabhupada. Srila Prabhupada ki, Shri Shri Gaur Nitai ki, Sri Sri Jagannath Baldev Subhadra ki, Sri Sri Radha Balabhavagan ki, Grantaraj Śrīmad Bhāgavatam ki, Go Premanandi, all glorious to some devotees, all glorious to some devotees, all glorious to some of the Shri Shri Guru, and Go Ranga, all glorious to Srila Prabhupada. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. The reading from Śrīmad Bhāgavatam, Canto 7, Chapter 7, What Prahlad Learned in the Womb, text number 42. Sukhaya, Dukkhamakshaya, Sankalpa, Iha, Kamaniyaha. Sadapnotiyaya, Anotnotaya, Dukam, Anihayaha, Sukhavritaha, Sukhaya Dukhamokshaya, Sankalpa Ihakaminaha, Sadapnotiyahai Dukam, Anihaya Sukhavritaha, Sukhaya Dukhamokshaya, Sankalpa Iha Karminaha, Sadapnoti Haya Dukam, Anihaya Sukhavritaha, Sukhaya Dukhamakshaya, Sankalpa Hyakamina, Anihaya Sukhavritaha, Sukhaya Dukhamakshaya, Sankalpa Ihakaminaha, Sadapnoti Haya Dukam, Anihaya Sukhavritaha, Sukhaya Dukhamokshaya, Sankalpa Ihakarminaha, Sadapnoti Haya Dukam, Anihaya Sukhavritaha. Ladies. Sukhaya Dukhamakshaya, Sankalpa Ihakaminaha, sarapnoti hayadukam anihaya sukhavrataha sukhaya dukkhamakshaya sankalpa ihya kaminaha sarapnoti hayadukam anihaya sukhavrataha sukhaya dukkhamakshaya sankalpa ihya kamina sarapnoti hayadukam anihaya sukhavritaha sukhaya dukkhamakshaya sankalpa ihya kaminaha sarapnoti hayadukam anihaya sukhavritaha sukhaya for achieving happiness by a so-called higher standard of life. Dukkhamakshaya for becoming free from misery. Sankalpaha the determination. Iha in this world. Karminaha of the living entity trying for economic development. Sada always. Apnoti achieves. Ihaya by activity or ambition. Dukkham only unhappiness. Anihayaha and from not desiring economic development. Sukha by happiness. Avritaha covered. Translation and purport by Srila Prabhupada. In this material world, every materialist desires to achieve happiness and diminish his distress, and therefore he acts accordingly. Actually, however, one is happy as long as one does not endeavor for happiness. As soon as one begins his activities for happiness, his conditions of distress begin. Purport. Every conditioned soul is bound by the laws of material nature, as described in Bhagavad Gita. Prakrite kriyamanani gunai karmani sarvashaha. Everyone has achieved a certain type of body given by material nature, according to the instructions of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Ishvara savabhutanam hrideshe junatishtati brahmayan savabhutani yantarurudadani mayaya. The Supreme Lord is situated in everyone's heart, O Arjuna, and is directing the wanderings of all living entities who are seated as on a machine made of the material energy. Bhagavad Gita 1861. The Supreme Personality of Godhead, the Super Soul, is present in everyone's heart, and as the living entity desires, the Lord gives him facilities with which to work according to his ambitions in different grades of bodies. The body is just like an instrument by which the living entity moves according to false desires for happiness, and thus suffers the pangs of birth, death, old age, and disease in different standards of life. Everyone begins his activities with some plan and ambition, but actually, from the beginning of one's plan to the end, one does not derive any happiness. On the contrary, as soon as one begins acting according to his plan, his life of distress immediately begins. Therefore, one should not be ambitious to dissipate the unhappy conditions of life, for one cannot do anything about them. Ahankara vimudatma kataham iti manyate. Although one is acting according to false ambitions, he thinks he can improve his material conditions by his activities. The Vedas enjoin that one should not try to increase happiness or decrease distress, for this is futile. Tasyaiva hetaho prayateta ko vidaha. One should work for self-realization, not for economic development, which is impossible to improve. Without endeavor, one can get the amount of happiness and distress for which he is destined, and one cannot change this. Therefore, it is better to use one's time for advancement in spiritual life of Krishna consciousness. One should not waste his valuable life as a human being. It is better to utilize this life for developing Krishna consciousness without ambitions for so-called happiness. Sukaya dukkha mokshaya sankapaya kaminaha sadapnoti hayadhukam anihaya sukhavritaha. In this material world, every materialist desires to achieve happiness and diminish his distress, and therefore he acts accordingly. Actually, however, one is happy as long as one does not endeavor for happiness. As soon as one begins his activities for happiness, his conditions of distress begin. Om agyanatimirandasya gyananjanaha shalakaya chakshul militam yena tasmai Sri Gurave namaha. Sri Chaitanya manobishtam stapitam yena bhutale swayam rupa kadamayam dadati svaparantikam. Namasreshtamannumapi sachiputramatra swarupam rupam tasya garajam urupurim maturim gostavritim radha kundagirivara mahoradika marava asam praptoya sapatita kripaya Sri Gurum tam natosmi. Sometimes it might appear in the pages of the Śrīmad Bhāgavatam and the Bhagavad Gita and the presentation of Krishna consciousness that we are the doomsday philosophers, that everything's going to end up in chaos and everything's not so good. We don't have a very optimistic view of the future. Things aren't looking too good. But it's a definition, or it's a presentation of the position of materialistic consciousness. On the other hand, the presentation of the position of a transcendentalist, of one who is engaged in Krishna consciousness, everything looks bright, everything's looking good for the future and for the present, because the material and the spiritual are diametrically opposed. You can say that when we engage in pursuit for material happiness, here it's in Prabhupada saying we're destined to experience, and Prahlad Maharaj is saying we're destined to experience distress because of many reasons. One reason is because of the competition that we face in the material world. Everybody's competing for limited resources to achieve success, to achieve happiness, to achieve progress and advancement. And because that's based on the body, because it's based on the individual, the selfishness of the conditioned soul, there has to be some side effects. There has to be some clash. There has to be some conflict of interest. And therefore we have border clashes, and therefore we have all sorts of egoistic wars going on all the time between nations and within communities and within families, because we're all those in a materialistic consciousness. We can't achieve ultimate happiness because it's a temporary thing. Bhagavad Gita says when you try to experience happiness in the material world, it's the happiness that we're after, that we're chasing, is temporary. And so by definition, it won't give sustainable happiness. That happiness is just going to be a flickering break from the distress, some interlude, intermission from distress will be some happiness. So that's the problem of trying to find happiness here in the material world. And There's a classic story, I think, from Hitopadesha or from Panchatantra, one of those genres of children's literature, not just children's literature, but instructive literature of different animals. And there's a story of the snakes, the king of the snakes, and he's looking very forlorn, and he's just resting on a rock on the side of a river. And the frogs are suspicious of the snake. The snake's just lying there, and he's not active. And usually he's very, very active. And he's climbing up and down rocks and through logs and up trees and through the waterfalls, etc. And so the king of the frogs, he approached the snake. And he asked the snake, "What's wrong? Why are you just lying here and you're not doing anything? You're not trying to get food. You're not trying to attack anybody. What's happening?" So the snake told the frog that, "I got cursed by a Brahmana. Brahmana cursed me when he was chanting his Gayatri in the river. He cursed me because I bit him. I bit his toe, and he cursed me that that I have to lie on the side of the river and be peaceful and try to be good to other living entities, and especially I should be friends with the frogs." So he got that curse. He should be friendly with all the frogs. So he said, "What I'll do with the frogs is, all you frogs, you jump on my back, and I'll take the frogs for a ride all around the river and through the waterfalls and up the trees, through the logs." And the frog went back and he told the other frogs that, "I think we're onto something here. This looks good. This snake is he's our friend, and he's going to take us on a nice tour around the river." So all the frogs jumped on. And the snake said, "Look, I'm an old snake and I don't have much energy. I need one frog a day. If I eat one frog a day, I can keep taking you for so long. I can take you on many joy rides around the river, around the forest." So they agreed. One frog is nothing. There's hundreds and hundreds of frogs. So the king of the snakes said, "Yes, you take the one frog at the back, the last near the tail. You just take that frog every day, no problem." So they were enjoying like anything. They were just having so much fun, and it was basking in the sun and going through the waterfalls and through the trees and through the logs and having a really, really enjoyable time for a long time. And the king of the snakes, of course, he's right at the front. He's at the head of the snake. And eventually all the frogs, one by one, they're being eaten. One frog. And the last frog who got eaten, he's still there for the ride. He's thinking, he won't eat me. He's going to just... He's a good snake. He's a friendly snake. He's taking us on. He's doing so many nice things for us, providing us so much enjoyment and facility. So he stayed there, and then he's offered, and then he's offered, and finally the king of the snakes gets eaten, and all the snakes are eaten, and all the frogs are eaten, and the snake's happy. He didn't have to do much work, and he just took the frogs for a ride. So we're like that in the material world. We're on the back of Maya, and she's taking us for a ride, and we're enjoying like anything. We think that everything that the material energy is presenting to us is for our enjoyment, for our happiness, and as long as we hold on, nothing's going to go wrong. The material energy won't take the last bite. She won't devour us, and of course she does. That's the illusion of this material world, that we become enamored by the glitter of the enticement of material enjoyment. We can enjoy in the material world, but we can't enjoy in the material world, and we have to keep hearing the lesson that this happiness in the material world is futile. Prabhupada uses the word futile. The happiness in the material world is like a mirage. Prahlad Maharaj says in the prayers, in his prayers, in this Śrīmad Bhāgavatam, he says that happiness here in the material world is just like a mirage in the desert. It's not. It looks like it's going to be water, and we're so thirsty. We believe it's water. We're so thirsty. We tell ourselves that it must be water until we get right in there, and we realize it's just dust. It's just an illusion. We just brought this illusion up because of desire. We had such an intense desire that we created water for us, but it's not really water. So material world is very much like that. It's a mirage in the desert in terms of happiness. But we can get happiness, and the happiness that is provided in the material world is the happiness that's available in the material world is available for the devotees. It's available for the transcendentalists who are capable of delaying sense gratification. an interesting definition that the psychologists have of a healthy mental condition is somebody who is capable of delaying gratification, or we say sense gratification. Somebody who's not always engaging their senses 24/7, but they're able to put off sense gratification. We might say Shreyas, who's somebody who puts off something for some immediate satisfaction for a higher purpose, to achieve something at a higher level. So we perform some form of austerity, some voluntary tapasya that we do to achieve something higher. Like any sportsman or any famous musician or any famous writer or any famous academic or any famous anybody in the world who wants to achieve something very, very, a high standard of achievement, they must perform tapasya. They must put in the hard yards and do the practice and the training and train for the marathon, or train their voice, or train their intellect. They have to do that, and in order to do that, they have to forego some satisfaction, some immediate gratification of the senses, some immediate gratification of the mind, some immediate gratification of the intelligence. There was a famous study done in the 70s. Most of these famous educational studies were done in Stanford University in the 70s, I think before they had ethics committees and stuff like that. So this one was, they had this study, it's called the marshmallow effect. Some of you might have heard of it, the marshmallow effect. And there's a child, he's put into a room, and they have a glass window, and the observers, the researchers are outside watching what the child's going to do, observing what he's doing, and they're keeping notes on what's happening inside. And the child he's given one marshmallow on a table. They put a marshmallow on a table, and he sits there, and he's got to sit there for 15 minutes looking at the marshmallow. And they say, you can eat the marshmallow, but at the end, in 15 minutes, if you don't eat the marshmallow, I'll give you another marshmallow. So you get 2 marshmallows. Or you get something else. They've changed the experiment a few times, but just say he got an extra reward by delaying the gratification, by not engaging, by not taking the marshmallow, he would get 2 marshmallows. Good deal. So they're watching the 5-year-old child. He's a young child, all for 5-year-old children. So the first child comes in there and he's looking at the marshmallow. And he's looking at the marshmallow, like 1 minute goes by. He's got to sit there for 15 minutes. And he's counting 1 minute, 1.5 minutes. And he says, no way, I can't wait 15 minutes. And he takes the marshmallow. He eats the marshmallow. Within 2 minutes, it's gone. So the next child comes in, and they're watching. And he's looking at the marshmallow, and he's looking. And within 30 seconds, he took the marshmallow. He's like, I can't wait 15 minutes. I'm just going to eat the marshmallow. So he eats the marshmallow. Anyway, some didn't. Some did. Some children sat there and looked at the marshmallow and just looked at it for 15 minutes, and then they came in and gave him another marshmallow, and he got 2 marshmallows. He was very happy. So some did and some didn't, and it was a longitudinal study. So they followed these 5-year-old children through their schooling, through their primary years, the secondary years, and through their education, tertiary education, or through their career, occupation. And they did this for 40 years, 50 years, following them up. And they would assess them on various criteria of success in life. And they discovered quite convincingly, of course every experiment has been debunked, that's not for sure, but they established quite convincingly that those children, when they were 5, who were able to delay the gratification and who waited for the second marshmallow for the reward, they were more successful on practically all levels of criteria. They were more, for those who are in careers, are in better careers, are in fulfilling careers. They were in careers that they wanted to do. They were making good money. They had good family life. They were stable. They were contributing to society. And those who didn't make it, who just ate the marshmallow within the 15-minute period, they were consistently having a tough life. They were always missing, they weren't achieving their goals in life, and they weren't so happy on the happiness scale. They weren't so satisfied. They didn't have such a high income, etc., etc. So they used the marshmallow effect to to prove that the delayed gratification is an important way. It's an important measure of future success, shreyas and preyas. That those who just focus on immediate gratification, they won't be successful. And that's very much a part of our philosophical understanding of Krishna consciousness. That we perform some tapasya, so we get a higher taste, and we perform some austerity, so that we can achieve something higher than what we've got now, something more relishable, something of a higher taste. Like we said yesterday, Rupa said yesterday, that param drishtva nivartate, the devotee is aspiring for that higher taste, and we get that higher taste not by just engaging our senses. That's a lower taste. We get the higher taste by what Lord Rishabhdev teaches his sons in the 5th canto, that you do that by tapo divyam putraka yena sattvam, that yashmed sokyam brahma sokyam tvarantam, that by doing tapasya, then we achieve that brahma sokyam, eternal happiness. We achieve a higher level of happiness by engaging in transcendental austerities, that tapo divyam. So in the Bhagavad Gita, the happiness, we hear that word happiness quite a bit, and it said in the 9th chapter in the Gita, it says that bhakti is the highest education. It's the Raja Vidya Rajaguyam, because it gives the direct perception of the self. And the self is aspiring for happiness. The soul wants to be anandamaya vyasat. The soul wants ananda. We're looking for happiness. We're looking for that pleasure. We're pleasure seeking. And that pleasure is available through bhakti. And we experience that directly, pratyaksha, through the senses. We experience happiness through all of our senses when we engage the senses in service to the master of the senses, Hrishikesha. That is a surefire way of experiencing transcendental, sustainable happiness by doing that. And susukam katum avyayam, that will give you happiness. Susukam, great happiness, intense happiness will come from engaging in this transcendental devotional service. It's happily performed. So, well, on one side we say this world's full of misery. It's a miserable world. It's a bad bargain. And so it seems like we are doomsday philosophers. It seems like we are. We do have a very negative outlook. We don't think that things are going to turn out too good for the materialists, and they're not, because it's an inbuilt obsolescence. It's something that's destined to give some form of frustration, because it has a beginning, middle, and an end. But bhakti is unlimited. Ananda, it's ananda vardhanam. It expands and expands and expands. The more we engage in bhakti, the more we do our devotional service, the more realization we get, and the more inspiration we get to continue to do the service. And that is something that is like a self-fulfilling prophecy, that the more bhakti you do, the more bhakti you want, and the more bhakti, the more capacity you have for engaging in devotional service. And by holding back, the less bhakti that we do, and that the more kind of compromised we are, the more miserable we become. So that moroseness comes from when we detract from engaging in devotional service. It's interesting that Prabhupada says in the Ishapanishad in the beginning, that when we have a sense of incompleteness in this material world, we feel like we want to satisfy ourselves, and to satisfy the self, we want to engage in all forms of types of sense gratification, because we have an incomplete sense. We don't feel that we're a whole. And Prabhupada says that all sense of incompleteness in the material world is due to an incomplete knowledge of the Absolute. When we don't have full knowledge of Krishna, then we don't feel satisfied. We feel like we have to fill the gap somehow. And so we fill the gap with all sorts of materialistic ways, and we try to divert the consciousness or the attention away from that feeling of incompleteness. And to complete that, we might do that through all forms of sense gratification, all forms of materialistic activities, through intoxication or through academic pursuits or through the arts or whatever it is, and we feel like we're engaging these activities to feel whole, to feel complete, to feel satisfied. But the real satisfaction comes from knowledge. When we have knowledge of Krishna, the gap is fulfilled. The gap is filled, and we feel content. And from that contentedness, we no longer have that unlimited burning desire to satisfy the senses for immediate gratification. We're able to delay gratification and able to use the human form of life for its purpose. And the ultimate purpose is to engage the senses in service to Krishna. In the Paramakaruna Bhajan, it says the first verse of the bhajan glorifies Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and Lord Nityananda because their process is simply blissful. Kevalananda Kanda. What they're doing is they're giving love of Godhead to everybody, and it's a very blissful, and it's a process which is accessible for everybody. And they're presenting it to everybody, to all conditioned souls, and therefore they're considered to be the essence of all incarnations, and they're the supreme, ultimate, munificent lordships, Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and Lord Nityananda, because they're giving this process which is simply pleasurable. So much happiness is available by engaging in the process of devotional service, by hearing and chanting, by kirtan, by knowledge. We become happy by knowledge. In ignorance we become distressed. In ignorance we become bewildered. In ignorance we're illusioned because we don't understand, we don't have full knowledge of a subject matter, we don't have knowledge of our position in life, our constitutional position. Who are we? And when we don't have that knowledge, we become fearful, we become confused, we become bewildered. So knowledge gives happiness. In fact, the characteristics of devotional service are all about happiness. We get bhakti by engaging in the pure devotional service. Happiness comes automatically. The first characteristic of bhakti, of engaging in pure devotional service, is klesha agni. We become free from all distress. And when we become free from distress, when the kleshas are destroyed, when they're burnt up, then we become happy. Obviously, the opposite side of distress is happiness, is joy. We feel joyful, we feel light. So that's the kleshagni is the first. And then the second one is subhada, that it gives all sorts of auspiciousness. And one of the Prabhupada says, Rupa Goswami says, there's three types of in auspiciousness. You will be happy. To be auspicious means happiness, and he defines three types of happiness. Rupa Goswami, there's happiness from sense enjoyment, from engaging in the senses, some form of happiness. There's more happiness in realization of Brahman. Some happiness is there, of course. There's some bliss there in Brahman, but not eternal. And there's ultimate happiness in engaging in the process of Krishna consciousness, in transcendental realization, self-realization. That is the ultimate form of happiness. So sense gratification, Brahman, and bhakti. Bhakti will give the ultimate happiness. So therefore it's shubhada. It gives all auspiciousness. That means that it's good for everybody. It's good for everyone in society can benefit from bhakti. Whether they know it or not, everybody's benefiting from the Krishna consciousness movement. So it's subhada. And it's moksha lagudakrit, happiness again. It derides the happiness that's enjoyed or experienced through moksha, through liberation. So bhakti is giving happiness at every level. It's giving happiness. Sudulabha is very, very difficult to achieve, bhakti. It's not an easy thing. It's not something that we can just get instantly. It's something that's got to be cultivated. And that's Prabhupada makes that definition in the beginning of the Nectar Devotion, that it's a cultivation. The bhakti is something that we have to nurture and nourish our bhakti. We nurture and nourish the bhakti by protecting the bhakti lata bij with a fence, the fence of association, the association of the devotees who protect us, who give us guidance, who give us shelter. And from that shelter, within that protection, we water the bhakti lata bij with the hearing and chanting of Krishna's transcendental pastimes, his holy names. So therefore, pure devotional service is something that's not achieved very readily. It's not achieved very easily. It's something that we have to work at. And we need to be determined and develop that determination, or that sankalpa. Today that word was used in the verse sankalpa. Sankalpa iha kaminaha. That for that the determination to be successful in our bhakti is to remain fixed on the goal. That we have a goal. In one sense we're saying don't have a goal here. Don't have materialistic goals. Have spiritual goals. If we have spiritual goals and we are strategic about achieving our goals, we'll keep things in perspective. Things will be in perspective, and we won't become anxious, and we won't become diverted and confused if we are strategic in our goals, in our bhakti journey. So it's not easy, but it's something that is worthwhile pursuing. It's not something that is instantaneously presented to us on a plate. And another happiness that comes from pure bhakti, and this is at a higher level of bhakti, is Sandrananda Visheshatma. In a higher level of bhakti, the happiness is a very intensely condensed form of bliss. There's in high level of happiness in prema bhakti. When we achieve higher stages of realization of our spiritual identity and our relationship with Krishna, then that bliss becomes highly condensed bliss. Very, very satisfying, very happy, and we drown in the bliss of bhakti. So there's happiness there. There's happiness in practically all of the characteristics of devotional service. There's happiness. And the final characteristic of pure bhakti is that it attracts Krishna Kashani. And by attracting Krishna, of course, one will be happy. If you're with Krishna and you've attracted Krishna and we become controller, we are able to control Krishna, then we'll become unlimitedly blissful, because we're in full Krishna consciousness, and that is a very satisfying and it's the ultimate goal of our bhakti is to have Krishna, to attract Krishna, that Krishna will want to be with us. Not that Krishna is just entertaining us, but that Krishna he's been seeking us for lifetimes and lifetimes, and finally we've come to realize, we've turned our head to the bird on the tree, and we realize that we want to be with Krishna, and Krishna wants to be with us. So it's a very high level. Throughout the Vedas we also hear so much about happiness and blessings, to be happy, to live long life. Sarve bhavantu sukhinaha. That we give happiness to everybody. We want everybody to be happy. We don't want people to be miserable. And the formula for happiness in the material world is connect with Krishna, connect with the devotees, connect with the process of Krishna consciousness, and we'll be happy. Without that connection, nasti buddhi ayuktasya, if we don't have connection, if the intelligence isn't connected with the Supreme, then there can be no happiness, there's no ultimate goal. We can't achieve the param gati. We can't get the ultimate goal, and we won't achieve happiness. Nasa sukam avapnoti. There's no happiness there if we are not connected with Krishna. And yesterday we've quoted the verse also, Rupa quoted the verse, Yashastra vidim utsrija, from the 16th chapter. At the end of the 16th chapter, Krishna is saying that if you follow the scriptural injunctions, if you take shelter of the Vedas, then you'll achieve success. And if you don't, you won't achieve the ultimate goal. You won't achieve happiness. You won't achieve success in this life or in the next life, because we act whimsically. We know something should be done, but we don't act on that thing because it's interfering with our with our plans for sense gratification. It's interfering with our plans for competition here in the material world, for making a name for myself, for progressing and for advancing in my material goals in life, and at the expense of my spiritual engagement and my spiritual realities, and my spiritual realizations. So, for me, the takeaway from the focus on this material world being the dukkhalayam ashashvatam, it's a place of misery, it's a temporary place. It can be used as not something that is, we can say, a very negative way of preaching or a negative way of presenting this material world, but it's a positive. Take it as a positive. All right, it's a temporary place, it's a place of misery if we're engaged in materialistic activities. This place can be a very happy place and a place of bliss if we engage in devotional service. And Prabhupada leaves us with that at the end of this purport, that one should not waste his valuable life as a human being. Nayame deho deha bhajam driloke kashtanka man ahati vidbujamye. That's Rishabhdeva's teachings. Don't use the human form of life like the hogs and the dogs. Use the human form of life for tapo divyam, for transcendental austerity, and become happy. Brahmasokyam tvanantam. And Prabhupada says, it is better to utilize this life for developing Krishna consciousness without ambitions for so-called happiness. The so-called happiness in the material world is a mirage in the desert. And we're convinced of that. And because of that conviction, Vishana Kamamaganai, because the devotee is completely disgusted with the idea of material happiness, of engaging in sense gratification, and because we understand the purpose of life, Visheshagno, we understand philosophically we understand what is the purpose of life, then the devotees won't become diverted on the path. We stick the path, we stay the journey, and along the way we experience so much relief from suffering, and we experience so much of happiness by connecting with the process which is Kevala Anandakanda, simply joyful and blissful Krishna consciousness. So there's a lot of room in bhakti for being happy, there's a lot of room in bhakti for experiencing joy, and it's something that we can experience. Prabhupada says in a purport that, what was it about joy at every moment? At the end of the Bhagavad Gita, Sanjaya, he's reflecting on the conversation, Samvadam of Krishna and Arjuna, and he says when he thinks about it, every time he's thinking about the pastime, he gets ever-increasing joy. Hrishyami muhur muhur. It's coming every moment, he's becoming joyful, he's becoming happy. And Prabhupada says the process of Krishna consciousness is one of increasing enlightenment. We become enlightened, increasingly enlightened, and there's joy not for some time, but at every moment. The joy is there at every moment. Hrishyami muhur muhur. It's non-stop enjoyment in bhakti. When we think of the samsmrita, when we remember Krishna's transcendental conversation with Arjuna, that should give us joy. That samvada should give us happiness and joy and relief and direction, guidance and shelter. And therefore it gives great happiness to the devotees to go back and reflect. That's at the end of the 18th chapter, to reflect on all the instructions that Krishna has given to Arjuna, has given to us, to give us the shelter that we aspire for, and the direction. So many amazing directions have been given in the Gita for happiness, for the conditioned soul. Last night we read that purport in the 11th chapter of the Gita, 1154. Prabhupada says this is the essence of the Bhagavad Gita. Karma Krin, in that verse. And there he says the Bhagavad Gita is presented for the conditioned soul to attract us back to our original, to the ultimate goal, what we're supposed to be doing here in the material world. So the lessons in the Bhagavad Gita are directed to us, to help us, to uplift us, and to inspire us in our bhakti. It's not something that it's not a bookish philosophy, or as Prabhupada said, armchair philosophy. Bhaktivedanta Thakur said we should read a text. We should read like the Bhagavad Gita or any book that we read, he says. We should read a text not to imprison the words of the text, that they stay there forever, but to engage with them and to transform. We read something to learn, to engage and to transform our intelligence, our consciousness to a higher level. So we read something, Bhagavad Gita, or we read Śrīmad Bhāgavatam, and through the process of sharing that with others, we transform. We develop a deeper realization, and we're giving it to others as well. And through that process, Krishna consciousness becomes dynamic. It's the transcendental dynamic nature of the soul. That's one of the definitions of bhakti that Prabhupada gives. That bhakti is the transcendental dynamic nature of the soul. It's always active. In bhakti, we're active. It's a verb. Bhakti means to do something. And what are we doing? We're doing things for the pleasure of Krishna so that we can become happy. Not so that we can become happy, but we do become happy. By pleasing Krishna, we become happy and satisfied. And we're not focusing on our own selfish happiness, but on the happiness of Krishna and the happiness of others, to give Krishna consciousness to others. So are there any reflections or points of interest from what we've been speaking? Prabhu, first hand, Mike.
Yeah, thank you, Prabhu. It's a very nice summary about Bhakti. And the first one you mentioned about the marshmallow experiment is very popular in many fields, not only theology but other fields as well. There is another theory is called constructivism or something like that, where the Vedic scripture says that children inherently they obtained by birth some kind of qualifications like that, and the teachers or facilitators' duty is to cultivate them. So that is the Vedic scripture mention. So if you compare with the marshmallow theory and this, the Vedic constructivism, is there any big difference, or what do you think? Thank you.
The difference between the marshmallow theorist and the Vedic constructivists. It is true that everyone is born with a certain. We have some scars from previous birth. So we come to any learning experience. We don't come as a blank slate. We come with some kind of impressions, whether we know it or not. We come with some impressions as a young child, and particularly as an adult, we come with experiences. And those experiences will determine the outcome of the learning experience. And in constructivist theory, the idea, the thesis is that a child or a person will learn by doing. We learn something by engaging in something and adding something to it, some added value to a particular concept or an idea. And we don't just learn something through bookish knowledge like that. We don't just learn something in an intellectual way, but we learn by doing. And I think Socrates said the same thing, and many other philosophers have said the same thing, that we learn by doing. And it's very much been adopted. That philosophy is very much the prevalent educational philosophy or educational psychology that has influenced curriculum development and in schools worldwide, that constructivist theory, that we learn by doing, and that we come to the learning experience with some prior knowledge and prior experiences. It's not really it's not a different concept from the marshmallow effect. The marshmallow effect was really focusing in a narrow way on the capacity to delay gratification. And in terms of learning theory, it sort of sits there on its own, that the purpose of the experiment and the proof of the longitudinal study is that children and adults will will have a better capacity for success, a greater capacity for success if they're capable of delaying gratification. And constructivist theory is really just about doing and engaging. So I don't really see the kind of connection so much. I didn't notice that was you behind your mask. Hare Krishna. Nice to see you. Yes, Mahatma Bhu.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu, and all the devotees. You said a very important point, that you have to do things yourself. Then you learn more. I will tell you an example. When I started doing post-graduation in the All India Institute, New Delhi, we used to see registrar doing so many things. So one day I told him, look, unless we do ourselves, how will we learn? How to stop, for example, bleeding from the tonsil bed, how to stop it. Sometimes you cauterize, but the bleeder is so big that you can't cauterize it. You will cauterize the whole fossa, and then there will be disaster. So you have to hold the bleeder, the blood vessel, with a sharp forceps, not very sharp, just moderately sharp. Then you ligate it. For ligation you need to practice how to tie a knot. So as you said, without doing yourself, just by seeing others, you will not ever learn the technique. So same thing is about devotional service. Unless we do good chanting, as Srila Prabhupada said all the time, our process will never be successful. So we have to attain a very good chanting situation. We have to, each word we have to really absorb our thoughts, as you said also, that we have to think of also the pastimes of Lord Krishna. Not only holy names, but the pastimes also. Now, this is just what you said. My question is, why so much importance is given to the lotus feet? I have asked this question many times, even to sannyasis, but they just superficially tell me. But they don't tell me the deeper part. So, what is your realization? Why so much importance everywhere throughout the literature? Srila Prabhupada especially mentions that you have to observe your thoughts in at the lotus feet of Krishna, so that your mind, I think one of the acharyas, I'm not remembering the name, that he says that you have to, like a what is it? White lotus? What is it? That you put your mind in the lotus feet, like a. So you can tell us details how to absorb the mind at the lotus feet of Krishna, and why it's so important. Lotus feet, why it's so important? Thank you.
Okay. I'm not sure if I can outdo the sannyasis who gave superficial.
But you have got a wide experience.
But
because in my heart, you are going to spiritual world straight away. The moment you leave this body, this is my impression.
Yeah.
You are with Krishna.
Yeah. So the lotus feet of Krishna, the lotus feet of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, it's said that in Chaitanya Charitamrita, one way that Chaitanya Mahaprabhu attracts the conditioned souls is by expanding the flavor of his lotus feet. So he expands the flavor. So here we're introducing not just the symbols of the feet, but there's some taste in the lotus feet of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. That means Lord Chaitanya's lotus feet have the capacity to, they can give anything that we want, anything that we need. We take shelter there, and therefore the feet are the lowest part of the body. And when we look at the feet, we're automatically, it puts us in the right consciousness of humility. We're approaching Krishna in a humble way, that we're looking at his feet, and we're not making direct we're just going straight to Krishna, eye contact with Krishna, but we're going through his lotus feet, and we're recognizing that as a jiva soul, we're part and parcel of Krishna, and we want to be as a speck of dust at his lotus feet, because we're considering ourselves to be insignificant. We're not considering ourselves to be worthy. We're not considering ourselves to be so qualified that I'm here with Krishna and Krishna should be embracing me. When is he going to embrace me? But we want to be, the prayer is to be as a speck of dust at the lotus feet of Krishna. And from there, we become, that's how we develop our qualification to enter into Krishna's pastimes. At the lotus feet of Krishna, he will dissolve our false ego. He will remove anarthas with the symbols of his feet, with his gourd and with different symbols on the lotus feet. They're able to, through meditating on those symbols of Krishna's lotus feet, we can become free from pride. We can become free from envy of other living entities. We can become, the mind can become peaceful and pacified so that it can remain there and it's not going to go somewhere else. So the symbols on the lotus feet of Krishna and Chaitanya Mahaprabhu are they're significant, and Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur has described them in detail, the 16 symbols on Krishna's feet, and Lord Chaitanya's got 32 symbols on his feet, on his lotus feet. So there's plenty of meditation to do on Lord Chaitanya's feet. There he's got so many items there, a chariot and all sorts of a fish and a club and a plough and many symbols, and each of the symbols has a significance, a reference given to us by the acharyas, and we can meditate on those symbols on the lotus feet of the Lord to become free from those obstacles that are stopping us from remaining at Krishna's lotus feet. But another aspect of Krishna's lotus feet is given in the fourth canto of the Bhagavatam, I think, where it says that the instructions that coming from the lotus, coming from the lotus mouth of the devotees, is like it has the power or potency to change consciousness of those who hear, of the hearer, because it's mixed with the saffron dust of the lotus feet of Krishna. The instruction it comes from Krishna's lotus feet, the saffron dust particles of his lotus feet, and that comes through the spiritual master or through the devotees, and that has the power to change the consciousness of the mundane mind. So the lotus feet have many references, as you said, and Krishna's lotus feet, the lotus feet of the spiritual master, the only way to contain pure devotional service. We bow down to his lotus feet again and again. We do that every day. We offer this prayer, the lotus feet of the spiritual master, because it's the only way we can achieve pure devotional service. By humbling ourselves. When we're at somebody's feet, where they can trample us, they can do anything, they can kick us in the head with their feet. We're vulnerable. We're being completely vulnerable at the lotus feet of Krishna. And King Kulashekar, he prays that he's adyaiva me vishatu manasa raja hangsa, that the swan of his mind be entangled in the stem of the lotus feet of the Lord. That right now, when he's in good consciousness, so that he doesn't want to wait for the time of death. He wants the swan of his mind to be entangled in the Lord's lotus feet, the stem of the Lord's lotus feet. So that's some.
Thank you. One more thing you mentioned about taste. So can you enlighten a bit more? What is the taste? What do you feel?
The taste.
Yeah.
Taste is like that rasa that we experience. It's in mundane sort of analysis or psychology of happiness. There are certain, as you know, there are certain chemicals in the brain that emit. There's the happiness chemical in the brain, and that's sort of it says that that's the chemical that has enabled the human species to survive and to reproduce, and it's a chemical that is the reward system that enables us to keep doing things that are favorable and also things that are not good for us. That's the dopamine that is it's a neurotransmitter, and when we do something that is pleasurable, it sends a chemical kind of impulse in the brain that reinforces that, and we want to keep doing that, also in a negative way as well. So that taste, when we taste something sweet, or when we taste that's physically, when we taste something sweet, it sends that message to the brain that we're enjoying this and we want more of that. Let's look for more chocolate cake, because that's going to send that impulse and that stimulus to the brain. And I want to get more milk sweets. I want to get another extra burfi today, because it's a reward system. Every time I get it, I feel good. It's a feel-good hormone that's going in the brain. But that taste isn't just physical taste. And in a spiritual sense, we say we've got a taste for the holy name. And you can't, you don't eat the holy name, right? And you don't think about ingesting the holy name, but we have a taste for the holy name. And we have a taste for hearing and chanting about Krishna's pastimes. So that taste means it's a kind of an internal, it's something that is going on, not in the grey matter of the brain, so to speak, but there's a sense that we're being rewarded. Krishna's rewarding us with that feel-good experience, that when we do this, Krishna's expanding the flavour of his lotus feet. He's expanding. He's giving us the opportunity to feel more and more satisfied by doing that particular activity in bhakti, whether it's hearing or chanting or serving or worshipping or whatever it is. In any item of bhakti, Krishna is giving us, when we say he's giving us a taste, he's reciprocating and giving us the ability, or giving us the inspiration to continue to do that thing. So we say that's a rasa, a taste, a mellow. Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur said, that's the mellow of bhakti, of devotional service.
Thank you.
Anything else?
Can I add some point about the lotus feet?
Nimai, lotus feet addition here.
Thank you, Mahaprabhu. Okay, so when we chant the Guru Pranam mantra, we say that Guru Brahma, Guru Vishnu, Guru Dev Maheshwara, Guru Eva Parang Brahma, Jano Tasmai Sri Gurave Namo. Then we say that Dhyanamulang Guru Murting, Pujamulang Guru Padam, Mantramulang Guru Bhakkang, Makhamulang Guru Kripa. So if you look at that second one, which is the Pujamulang Guru Padam. So we want to worship the lotus feet of Krishna. Why it is that? It is so charming. If I look at the Rasalila in the beginning, so when the gopis feel proud of having association with Krishna, Krishna hid it. So she went away. And then this next part was so beautiful in terms of literary work, that they're asking all these trees, all the birds, even the grass is saying that you are become like the thrilled kind of coming out a spike kind of thing from the earth body. So certainly Krishna has went on you, touch you. That's why you become like that. So finally, when they thought that no, Krishna's feet is so soft, and Krishna must be getting some hard time, because he is walking on this ground, and then Krishna appeared. So you understand the lotus feet is so significant when you think about your guru, and you always quickly humble to his feet, nowhere else. Next one is the beauty of lotus feet is that Trinadepi Shuchine Shunichano Taroribo Shoeshnuna, and then Omanina Mana Dena Kirtaniya Sadahari. So we have to be humble. So when we start chanting, we always tell that we are dinhin. Please, I am ignorant child, please accept me on your lotus feet. Then your chanting will be more sweet, as I was saying, Rasha. The beauty of Rasha will come, the attraction, right?
Nice.
Rati will come. Thank you.
Thank you, Nima. Yes, Sivya, thank you for that. Rasha.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji. Thank you for the nice class. Prabhuji, you mentioned that we shouldn't be attached to the flickering happiness of this material world. But Prabhu, we see even when we're spiritually happy, like we're coming to the temple, we're doing the services, taking darshan, we're like, aren't we like getting attached to the material world? And then we feel like, oh, we're happy here, so we don't want to go back to Lord Krishna. So how do we understand this?
Okay. Thank you. The happiness that we're experiencing here, we don't have to go back to Krishna because we're already with Krishna. This is the spiritual world. It's a ambassador. It's the embassy of the spiritual world here in the temple. So that happiness is not material happiness. Of course, it's not the highest level of bhava bhakti or prema bhakti, that happiness that we're experiencing, but it will become that if we continue to engage in the services and coming here and experience the happiness. And the happiness that we experience here in the temple and engaging with devotional service and the festivals and the artis and the kirtan, that happiness is not material. And that was really the point of today's purport, and the point of the class is that we have material happiness and spiritual happiness, and they're diametrically opposed to each other. And we do have happiness. We do call the material world a place of misery. We do call material world a temporary place. But this material world, if we can engage in bhakti, we can engage in devotional service, and here through that process, we become happy, and we don't become attached to the material world. We become detached. That happiness enables us to become detached from the material world.
Thank you, Prabhuji.
Thank you.
Maybe I can add some point on you.
Anybody else like to before me, I ask, as anybody else has a reflection or a point, question to ask? Yes, Prabhu. Then Nimai.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu, thank you. Prabhu here is mentioning that we should not, the more we go after the happiness, more miserable one become. But also it is said that there is a happiness in spiritual life. Now the attraction is towards spiritual life is now again like, so how to reconcile these 2 points?
Same thing as Sivya's question, the happiness that we're aspiring for in spiritual life, that aspiring for happiness in the material world it's futile, Prabhupada says. It means it can't be achieved. It's something that can't be achieved in the material world because it's temporary. There will be happiness there. It's one level of happiness, but that happiness is very insignificant compared to the happiness that we can experience in the spiritual world in transcendental devotional service. So aspiring for the happiness of devotional service, we should plan for that happiness. We should be making our own personal plan and our own community plan to increase unlimitedly increase, anandam buddhi vardhanam, unlimitedly increase the happiness that we experience in devotional service through festivals and through book distribution and through kirtan and through prasadam and increasing the quality and not just quantity of everything, but increasing the quality of our bhakti. That will detach us from the material world because we're focused on happiness outside and not inside. It's a selfless happiness. Otherwise, materialistic happiness is selfish happiness. It's for the self.
Yeah, thank you, Prabhu.
So the last 2 questions were connected, I would say. Yeah. So if you look at the Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's teaching to I think Sanatana Rupa Goswami, that he explained his original attributes in 3 Shaktis. One is his Sarupa Shakti, which is fully divine, Satchitananda. Another is the material or Maya Shakti, which is the manifested world. And third one in between, the marginal energy, which we are, the living entities. So assume that you are seeing the river where plenty of water is flowing through. This water is the Sarup Shakti, which is full of bliss, consciousness and ananda. Whereas the solid bank is the material, where full of sorrow, sadness. And you are sitting in between. So when flood comes, the water goes over the bank, and then it lost its quality of the fluidity. It is fully absorbed with this soil and rocks. So that means we are entangled with our sense gratification, our material attraction, as we also discussed before, and we are in this cycle of death, birth, misery and disease. So when you are more attached to that world, we are forgetting, we are actually looking back to Krishna. But when you are fully submerged into that water with Satchitananda Sarup, then your true Ananda will come, will be flourished. So as if that you are going from home to a destination, as you are going close to destination, you are away from the home. Likewise, when you are away from the material nature or Maya Shakti, more close to the Sarup Shakti, you are more blissful, more conscious, Krishna consciousness coming, flourishing. It is like that you are cleaning a brass pot or a silver pot, it gets more shiny. So it is like that. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Nimai, for reminding us of our Tatastha Shakti and the bliss and ananda of being in connection with the Swarup Shakti of Krishna, Satchidananda. Grantharaj Śrīmad Bhāgavatam ki, Srila Prabhupada ki, Go Premanandi.